We have witnessed numerous high-profile trials involving the prosecution of celebrities, serial killers, and even political figures. Individuals in positions of power have utilized the legal system to administer justice or advance their personal agendas. At times, both of these motivations coexist. Yet, there have been trials in centuries past that continue to leave a mark on history and cast a dark shadow over those involved. In May of 1563, Mary, Queen of Scots, subjected the deceased Earl of Huntly's preserved body to trial proceedings. Several months after his demise, the body was found guilty of treason. One might assume this to be an isolated and chilling event. But history reveals it wasn't the first occurrence of its kind. Approximately 8 centuries earlier, a pope had similarly treated another pope in a comparable manner. In January of AD 897, Pope Formosus, deceased for more than 6 months, was exhumed, placed on a throne, and subjected to a bizarre trial orchestrated by Pope Stephen VI. This event became known as the Cadaver Synod. The trial unfolded in the Basilica di San Giovanni in Laterano, where Pope Stephen had the decaying remains of Pope Formosus adorned in ornate ecclesiastical robes, then situated, to the best of its ability, upon the papal throne. Given the former Bishop of Rome's inability to speak in its own defense due to its advanced state of decay, Stephen appointed a young deacon to stand in for the deceased pope. Understandably, the deacon was overwhelmed with fear and proved incapable of mounting a robust defense. Unperturbed by the unfairness and evident absurdity of the situation, Stephen proceeded with the trial. The pope proceeded to loudly accuse the deteriorating body of his predecessor, hurling weighty allegations while the lifeless corpse remained rigid. Among the charges leveled against Formosus's remains were perjury, aspiring to the papacy, and holding multiple bishoprics concurrently. Given the lack of consciousness on Formosus's part and the feeble defense put forth by the deacon, it was challenging to ascertain whether Formosus was genuinely guilty of these charges. Nonetheless, Pope Stephen persisted in his tirade. At some point during the course of the trial, the ground beneath the basilica began to shake, a foreboding sign that Stephen blatantly ignored. Consequently, the trial concluded, and unsurprisingly, Pope Formosus was found guilty on all counts. As a result, all actions carried out by Formosus during his tenure as Bishop of Rome were retroactively invalidated. From blessings to appointments, every single action undertaken under his papacy was rendered insignificant. This fate even befell 3 of Formosus's fingers, often used for blessings, which were severed and cast into the Tiber River. Stephen harbored no forgiveness for his predecessor, and his resolve was abundantly clear. The aftermath of this gruesome ordeal had dire consequences for the reigning Bishop of Rome. It ushered in a period of darkness for the Church, and the populace was enraged. Riots erupted in the streets, plunging Rome into yet another period of turmoil. As if the abused remains of Pope Formosus hadn't suffered enough. Following the guilty verdict, legend has it that Stephen had the body reburied, this time in a common cemetery, away from the Church's lands. However, before long, the current pope couldn't bear the thought of his condemned predecessor resting in such an ordinary manner, prompting him to exhume the body once more, this time discarding it in the Tiber River, a fate typically reserved for criminals and political adversaries. After enduring such a gruesome fate, the body somehow managed to avoid complete obscurity, being discovered later by either a monk or a fisherman, depending on the account. Regardless of the specifics, this individual retrieved the decomposing remains from the water, secretly sheltering them for a period, before eventually ensuring their reburial at St. Peter's Basilica. Finally, Pope Formosus found his ultimate resting place. As for Pope Stephen, mere months after the macabre legal proceedings, he was imprisoned and ultimately strangled by his incarcerated detractors. With the grim and ghastly conclusion to this horrendous spectacle, one might ponder whether it was all worth it. What motivated Pope Stephen to undertake such an endeavor? How could such a spectacle come to pass? During the era of the Cadaver Synod, Rome was steeped in significant turmoil. From 872 to the mid-10th century, Over 20 popes were appointed, further contributing to the instability of the Holy Roman Empire, which had been in decline since Charlemagne's death. Political power played a pivotal role in shaping events. Even within the ranks of the Roman bishops, the impact of external political influences and the resulting divisions was evident. Even the ostensibly inert Formosus, decomposing on the papal throne during his trial, might have been swayed by a lust for power in his earlier years before becoming pope. Formosus had served as the bishop of Porto Santa Rufina during Nicholas I's reign. According to the Church's 15th canon, to prevent power struggles, a single individual could only hold the position of bishop for one diocese at a time. This presented a challenge for Formosus after being sent as a legate to Bulgaria in 866, where the locals requested him as their bishop. Pope Nicholas rightfully denied this request, but its repercussions followed Formosus into the reign of Pope John VIII. The situation escalated to the point where Pope John pressed charges against Formosus, including manipulating the Bulgarian populace for personal gain and betraying the papacy. As punishment, Formosus was excommunicated and supported Charles the Bald of the Holy Roman Empire. However, neither the excommunication nor Pope John VIII's reign lasted long. In 882, John was assassinated through poison and violence, and his successor, Pope Marinus I, would lift Formosus's excommunication a decade later, ultimately leading to Formosus becoming pope. While the people of Rome admired Pope Formosus, those around him in positions of power often held conflicting sentiments, not only within the Church but also within the Holy Roman Empire. This stemmed largely from Formosus's support of Arnulf of Carinthia's bid for the Holy Roman imperial throne against Emperor Guy III of Spoleto's heir. Formosus would eventually crown Arnulf as emperor, a decision that would be remembered by Pope Stephen, who backed Lambert, Guy's son, in a fortunate turn for him. Formosus passed away a few months later in 896, likely due to stroke or poisoning, with Arnulf meeting a similar fate around the same time. The immediate aftermath was tumultuous, with riots erupting and Pope Boniface VI, Formosus's direct successor, dying within 2 weeks, again from disease or poison. His brief reign proved inconsequential, leading to Stephen's ascension to the papacy, influenced greatly by their allegiance to rival political factions in the Holy Roman Empire. Stephen harbored a deep-seated animosity toward Formosus from the outset. Many of the accusations voiced by Pope John VIII against Formosus seemed to linger in Stephen's mind, and his resentment was reaching its zenith. For Pope Stephen,